the LA Lakers could sure use Anthony Davis, but trading in for LeBron. Welcome on to a big Tuesday edition of Dunc'd On, and I'm glad we waited to start off the 15 and 60. We may not get through that much of it because we have some very interesting and foreseen by some more than others, perhaps, news. Nico Harrison has been relieved of his duties as general manager of the Dallas Mavericks.
And it is, by my estimation and yours, a deserved decision by Patrick Dumont and the ownership of the Dallas Mavericks. The best time to fire Nico Harrison would have been before the Luka Doncic trade. The second best time would have been before the Quentin Grimes dump, but earlier is still better than later. And this is actually, I mean, we've talked about the Luka Doncic trade so much, and we'll probably do a little bit here, but I want to get more into just briefly the theory of this. And it's come up a lot. I think about Rob Hennigan with the Magic, a number of them, which is once you decide your team should not be running like that, there's a reason that they shouldn't be doing it anymore. You are far better served to let them go rather than give them any more, because, for example, one of the major decisions that the Dallas Mavericks have to make between now and the trade deadline in February, not that they have to do it this week, is the long-term direction of the franchise. Anthony Davis is focal point in that. And if you think that you might want to trade Anthony Davis, probably don't want the person making the decisions at the helm who thinks he's great and who acquired him and who values him the way that Nico Harrison does. So once you decide that that person is not the right person for the job, you have to get rid of them immediately.
Yeah, and we've talked about this, and it thankfully in NBA GM circles until recently hadn't been as much of an issue the last few years. But there are certainly many instances of that, like Rob Hennigan trading the number 10 pick for Serge Ibaka to try to save his job, or Jim Buss, as Yaron Weitzman and I talked about last week, signing Luol Deng and Timofey Mozgov to try to fulfill this playoff promise to Jeanie Buss. Yeah, when all you care about is short term, got to save my job, then that's not the right person to be the steward of your franchise. So, one thing that was has been spouted. I mean, everyone, really hates Nico Harrison and that he thought that this was a terrible deal. And we certainly agree with that as well, and said so at the time, as did everyone. But one thing that's brought up is, well, why do it now? He hasn't even had a chance to see Kyrie on the floor. We haven't had a chance to see Derek Lively and Anthony Davis really play together. Anthony Davis has been injured. We haven't been able to see his vision. So why is it fair to fire him now? If you're going to greenlight this trade at the time, how is it fair to fire him now? Patrick Dumont, you were part of this decision too. Like, how are you not owning it and not sticking by him to at least see through whether his vision could succeed or not? Even though most of us would consider it flawed, Patrick Dumont clearly didn't at the time.
Nate, he's not owning the decision, he's governing the decision. But I did think that it was... I did think that it was...
Oh, my God.
Notable that Dumont's statement that came out sort of yada, 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 everything from the 2024 finals to this year, which is a pretty important...
Well, you cannot say... I mean, he admitted it to that fan. You cannot, yesterday, off the record, but you cannot say on the record in a letter to season ticket holders or whatever that we made a mistake with this trade, because that's insulting to the players who are on the team still. You still have to maintain decorum in that way. And you did acquire these players. Like, they're part of why you're making this move is to just get the mood around the team right. So you can't say that about your current players.
You're right. And so there's more than a kernel. There's some real truth to the idea of hey, you didn't get to play out. Well, too bad. Like, that the part of the reason that Kyrie Irving tore his ACL, in our estimation, is that he had an increased workload because they traded Luka Doncic. And it's not everyone gets to have that workout. I mean, Kyrie Irving and
Anthony Davis got hurt, which you probably could have predicted.
Could have predicted. I mean, at least
that was the flaw in the plan.
Yeah, and I think that the plan would have been flawed even if they had gotten a fair shake, even if they had. I mean, that was I was less optimistic about the kind of the core, but the nature of it is deserve don't got nothing to do with it. I mean, if you think that this person isn't right for the job, you have to use the forces that you have, and you don't get additional if you can come to that estimation without the additional information, then the person involved is not entitled to it. Nico Harrison's still going to make his money, but he's not entitled to that kind of difference, particularly when these are long-term injuries. And and the some of the things that need to happen on this could happen quickly. They don't have to, like, Anthony Davis doesn't have to be traded tomorrow, but the conversations around where this team is going, and I think that the Luka trade is enough to doom this. I mean, it is especially because it wasn't forced by the star. It is to my estimation, the most disastrous trade, knowing what we know right now in NBA history. And we'll of course spend time putting it in context later on. We already have, but there are plenty of other sins. And for me, the reason why you need to move on from Nico Harrison beyond the obvious is that what he did after Kyrie Irving went down. And so there is this so you got screwed by circumstance, by Kyrie Irving getting hurt. But then that was a known condition coming into this offseason, coming into this season. And when Kyrie Irving gets back, that's not known, but that he was going to be out to start. And they had the goal because of the trade to be competitive right now. Nico Harrison, and we talked about this in offseason grades, did a series of things that made sense in isolation. PJ Washington's a very good player. Daniel Gafford's a very good player. They got sense of guys to extensions.
Well, I didn't like either of those trades at the time. They
no. What I'm saying is the stuff they did in the 25 offseason.
Okay.
And
so, you're talking about the extensions for those.
Yes, the extensions and just keeping this group together, because what Nico Harrison failed to do was say, like, oh, we need players to facilitate this offense. We need to we have a lot of play finishers, in part because that's what makes Luka Doncic and Luka in particular, but Kyrie Irving to a lesser extent, that's what makes their game sing, and what makes these other players sing. They need someone to set it up, and they didn't have that player, and so the offense is a house of cards that has just been beyond abysmal so far this year. And that was so I brought it up. I looked back at my offseason grades after Nico Harrison got fired just to make sure that I had this in there. And it was basically that all these moves made sense in isolation, but they didn't create a cogent enough team on the floor. And so the Mavericks, as we're recording this, 105.3 clean the glass offensive rating. That is worst in the NBA. That is worse than the Pacers, who've been without Halliburton and McConnell and mostly Andrew Nemhard. That's worse than everyone. It's about 10 points per 100 possessions worse than the league average, not than the best in the league, than the league average. And so some of that, shooting and stuff could regress to the mean. But it's the idea is even if you want to give him the grace, he still did a horrendous job identifying how to make this team competitive, which was ostensibly his goal.
Yeah, I think so. And regardless of how big of a screw up the Luka trade was in retrospect, and yeah, I agreed the idea that they needed to be competitive this year. He tried to build that team, didn't succeed. Now, you could also say, well, hey, they probably did need to hold on to PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford because Derek Lively and Anthony Davis got injured. But of course, that was the big flaw in the plan to begin with. And certainly many of the optics early in the season, like AD coming into camp out of shape with a calf injury, just like Luka. I mean, you can't even make this stuff up. They got rid of Luka because of that, and now they brought in someone who's 7 years older than him, who has the same problem, and in theory was like so much more motivated. Was one of Nico's guys from that perspective, because he doesn't drink beer sometimes. But in any event, back to what you're saying about deserve got nothing to do with it. I mean, obviously he does deserve it, but the current situation had gotten to a point at which it seemed like it was untenable. From a business perspective, I think it really did resonate because they were probably insulated, I think, from a season ticket standpoint, because a lot of those renewals had already happened. They ended up increasing prices, which of course got a bunch of negative press, big surprise. But now you have fans chanting "Fire Nico" as PJ Washington is at the foul line shooting the tying free throws at the end of the game. Like that kind of an atmosphere wasn't tenable. The players are saying to Tim McMahon, like, these fans want us to lose. And they had this whole spiel where they had brought in a separate staircase so that Nico Harrison could walk to and from his seats that were now on the opposite side of the arena that someone discovered. It was just a massive distraction for what they're trying to do. And then you throw in the fact that you're probably going to now need to perform some pretty major surgery on this roster, either to A, become competitive, or B, tear it down and rebuild around Cooper Flagg when you have 4 years without control of your draft pick coming up after this year. And when Nico Harrison is so invested in proving that he made the right move with the Doncic trade, he clearly would just continue to double and triple down on this, and you couldn't have that continue. So I think all those reasons are you had to move on from him, but clearly the Luka trade was
just as a
offense.
Just as a brief aside, I believe we were both physically present for another vicious fan response to a move that a general manager made, and that was when Joe Lacob and everybody else got relentlessly booed at the Chris Mullin jersey retirement after
that was before my time. That was 2 years before I started. That was, I think, 2012 when they were tanking to keep the pick that became Harrison Barnes.
Yes, tanking to keep the pick that the trade was Monte Ellis and Andrew Bogut were the principals, and that got an aggressive response. Monte Ellis was a fan favorite, and it ended up being correct. And so you could say in the most optimistic version, that Nico Harrison was right, will be right in that, but he wasn't. And it's also a different thing because superstar player moves are very different than everything else. And so, like, fan response doesn't have to be the only thing, but it is an indicator of these other problems. And it was already an untenable situation, but it made it even harder to manage from a kind of an ownership, like a governor standpoint. And so I think we'll spend other time also on this, but like,
well, I guess I have a little more. I mean, this was the single most unpopular move that a team has made in NBA history among its own fan base, right? I can't think of anything else that would even be close.
I can't either, especially because everything that we've seen and heard since was that Luka Doncic wanted to stay in Dallas. It wasn't the other superstar trades that have happened or any like, where, like the player was pushing in that direction. And usually that was done at least some version of publicly. So it's wild. And like Luka Doncic was both great and a fan favorite, which is an unusual combination for a player to be dealt.
And then another thing too that came out in the recent reporting, and this was plastered all over everywhere. I mean, I would imagine it was the amount of detail that came out. I think, obviously this is someone who is still sticking around. I don't know whether it's Dumont or Rick Welts or who else would have even been in the room for these. Oh, I mean, it's probably Cuban actually would probably be my guess, who is leaking this stuff because apparently Dumont's talking to him again. But whatever. I don't want to speculate on that, but certainly let's just say every reporter had all the details that Nico Harrison walked into the conference room at 10:01 a.m. Central Time, 1 minute late for his summary firing, which had been scheduled for 10 o'clock. And there's like that level of detail on it.
I thought we were talking about the emptying the notebook stuff, like some and Tim Cato's stuff. Like, I'm not criticizing, they do like the board that Nico Harrison allegedly had and all that type of stuff. And I'm not criticizing.
I haven't read that one yet.
There was basically Tim Cato had it that we don't know when this occurred, that Nico Harrison had some sort of player rankings and had Drew Holiday and Nikola Jokic in the same tier. And so I don't care when that was unless Jokic was still in the Adriatic League. That wasn't true. As great as Drew Holiday has been. I appreciate it.
But anyway, this is in the report, all over the reporting. And it was that Anthony Davis with this calf issue has wanted to come back, and was listed as questionable a couple of times. And then Dumont sided with members of the Mavs medical staff who were adamant that Davis should err on the side of caution. there was another side from the medical staff. Who was that other side? Was that Nico Harrison?
Well, we know Anthony. We know Anthony Davis
himself trying to come back to. I mean, AD. I will give AD credit that he does come back. Like he honestly came back way too early, both from the groin issue that he re-injured to try to have a nice effect and prove Nico right, and then he wanted them to at least try to make the play. Like he does try to. He gets injured, but he does try to come back and play through it. But anyway, that was like was Nico's like, no, we should get him out there to play, and was he doing that to like make himself look better and save a job? It really, obviously, at this point,
there's never been moral hazard in the Mavericks' decisions on who was going to play and when. That's never happened.
So I just wanted to go through this a little bit right now. Obviously, there will be much more discussion on this, but you and I both agree the Mavericks could trade Anthony Davis. And I guess that's like actually one other thing we haven't talked about too, which is, let's say they never are in position to draft Cooper Flagg, and they just kind of, things go wrong. Kyrie tears the ACL. Things aren't going that great with AD this year. But it's kind of like, well, we don't have any other path. So maybe we just stand by Nico and see if his vision could have worked when healthy. But now you're just completely poisoning things for Cooper Flagg. And his mom even had a retweet that she tried to say was more about the fans, because it was like a 2-sentence tweet, and one of them was, dealing with the fire Nico chance is really hard for the players. And the second part was, oh, you got to fucking get rid of this clown, basically. And so she retweeted that, and then she was like, oh no, it was just about the first part, not the second part. But it clearly, I mean, Cooper Flagg, whatever, we hear this every year with guys who are like, oh yeah, didn't lose this much the last 2 years. We're now 3-7 or whatever it is. I can't believe we're losing so much. But clearly this is just a total shit show. And Cooper Flagg, I mean, I felt like, honestly, if I had been Cooper Flagg's representative, I would have pulled out the I'm not going to play in Dallas card because of just everything that had happened. But in any event, like, this is going really poorly for him, and he's off to a terrible start. The team's off to a terrible start, and you actually have hope, right? Like, God dropped you another lifeline. If it was just, hey, we got to just play out the string with Anthony Davis, and we don't have our draft picks, we're headed towards Phoenix Suns and Brooklyn Nets hell for the next 5 years. Yeah, just keep Nico around. How much damage can he do? But now that you actually have this lifeline, you got to build around Cooper Flagg. You got to give him the right environment.
Yeah,
and so,
thank you for mentioning it, because that was also one of the core sin that Nico Harrison had after in the 2025 offseason was they already had Cooper Flagg. They already won the lottery for him, and they could have pivoted at that point too. They could have been like, okay, I still think this part was right, but we can do something around him. And they did do that. They're loading up. Like, I think Cooper Flagg's best at power forward. They're loading up with not only 5s, which you could do, but also with 4s and 3s and no point guards. And so it led to this situation where
no shooting guards. They don't have a shit. Well, I mean, they had Klay Thompson. He looks looking pretty done these days, unfortunately.
Yes, he is. And so, like, it made it, in some ways, Cooper Flagg, you could argue, gave the Mavericks franchise a lifeline, like a real one, because he's one of the most talented prospects in the last half decade, if not longer. But it also created that hope. And I think that's a really good way to phrase it.
So yeah, the Mavs are 3-8, by the way. Did we ever even do their stats? I guess we didn't.
No,
huh?
I'll do it now. The Mavericks are 3-8 on the season. Their negative 5.7 net rating is 22nd. They're 29th on offense, and they are 4th on defense, which is interesting. And at some point we'll get into that. And ESPN's BPI projects them to finish with 35 wins, which would be out of the play-in and gives them a 13% chance of making the playoffs.
Higher than you might have expected, actually. And then we do, in fact, have a WATFO on this.
We do. It was posed on April 21st, 2025. And it was, what are the odds that Nico Harrison is no longer the lead decision maker by the 2026 NBA draft? And I said it was an 80% chance. You said it was a 55% chance. And really, what our disagreement primarily was here was you were a bigger believer in like and both before and after. And I mean, you very well could have been right in the Mavericks being competitive. And it has been a worst case scenario in terms of that. And that is really what doomed Nico Harrison.
Yeah, it would seem so. And this is before they did anything in the off season too. So let's just talk about the possibility of moving Anthony Davis just in a more abstract terms. He makes $54.1 million this year. That makes things difficult because who, just in general, what kind of team? Give me the outline of a team that would be looking to acquire one Anthony Davis, considering the following. He will be extension eligible this
Oh
offseason.
boy.
He has one more year left at $58.5 million and then a $62.8 million player option after that. And of course, his injury history and the fact that he will turn 33 this season. So, who would be, what sort of team would roll the dice on Anthony Davis considering those things?
It's a team that thinks that he is the missing piece in some ways. I mean, he was the second best player on the Lakers championship team, albeit that was a long time ago now, but that he can be the that he can be the defensive anchor and that has a lot of other things in place. Now, what is that team offering in order to incentivize it? But it's a team that's focused heavily on the short term. Ideally for the Mavericks, a team that has long-term resources and that really needs that defensive foundation. Honestly, they could they could Davis is fit next to a lot of other bigs in his career, but it's a team that needs that. So who fits that description? I mean, so it could be either Davis makes that out of whole cloth, or it could be that he is an upgrade on the guy you have. Like, I'm not suggesting this, but like theoretically, if the Wolves felt that AD was better for them than Rudy Gobert over the next 3 years, they could talk about something with that structure, but there's some real complications of that move logistically, but just conceptually. So it could be as an upgrade on an existing player or to create a new identity.
Yeah, and also it's a team that has some level of desperation. A team that is happy with its path right now is not going to do this. A team that feels like, well, you know what, we're probably not going to win right now. Yeah, we probably won't win with AD, but hey, maybe if he gets back to the form that he was flashing as recently as last year with the Lakers, then a guy who was in the All NBA conversation before he got hurt with the groin last year. You know, if we could get that guy back, and maybe we get him 1 year and it's lightning in a bottle, and yeah, we'll just deal with the contract in the back end. Who cares? So that level of desperation, but also thinking you have a chance. I mean, Golden State Warriors are the first one that comes to mind for me there, and they also still have their picks and some young players. Now, this isn't even getting into the question of what the price should be, right? I mean,
Right.
Dallas, you would think, would want to move him immediately. Davis, if they were to move on from him, would want to be moved as soon as possible too, so that he would then be eligible next off season for the largest possible extension. So to be moved at the deadline, if he gets moved next off season, which would be easier with some of the finances as we could talk about, but that then if he gets moved next off season, then he can't get the largest extension until the maybe right before the trade deadline if he gets moved right at the start. But that's we'll see whether that's even remotely in the conversation. I think the best case scenario for Dallas is he comes back, he gets in better shape, he plays well, and then you can move him, because you don't want to play too well, because you need to get that 26th draft pick, and you also want to maximize his value. I mean, I think as soon as he comes back and starts playing well, you got to seize the moment to move him before the next injury. And he already, I think, with the way this season has started and him being out of shape, has his trade value has lowered significantly from where it would have been this offseason. So the Warriors come to mind, but the problem there is Draymond or Jimmy has to be in the deal. Were there any specific teams that come to mind for you? I kind of have a list, but I'm interested to see if you have. Any
I don't
thoughts?
think of them as win now, but when you think about the incentives in play, the Phoenix Suns, just because they have so little control over their own draft. So if there's a way that they could get better in the short term, that actually kind of helps them.
Yeah, I mean, but they don't have anything to send. I mean,
No.
would Dallas be interested in like getting Jalen Green and again, because Phoenix has no draft picks really that they can send. Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks, and then you could flip Dylan Brooks for something else. Like that's what it would have to be. Yeah, Phoenix, that's an interesting one though. But I again, like that's at that point, is the deal worth doing if you're Dallas? I would say you have to just take whatever the best offer is, because the likelihood is that it's going to get worse instead of better. But yeah, I mean, if it's Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks, then you're kind of like, all right, maybe we'll just wait until the offseason. However, he's going to then cause you to win games. But maybe they'll be bad enough that they'll still be, 6-7, and they could maybe jump up a little bit, or at least get a decent lottery pick. I don't think they're going to be in playoff contention, even though I thought they might be that way. I mean, the LA Lakers could sure use Anthony Davis, but trading in for LeBron, probably not going to happen. LeBron is a no trade. If you told LeBron, hey, we're going to release you right afterwards, and he could go sign wherever he wanted to, would that be enough? But I mean, I still think LeBron could probably give the Lakers more than AD could this year, and then he comes off the books next year, which Davis wouldn't. And Davis and Doncic would certainly be an excellent theoretical combination, like Davis, Doncic, and Reeves. But that would eat up their cap space this offseason, and obviously, they're not going to make another trade with the Lakers. Lakers don't have much to offer. Either they have a 2031 pick. That's about it.
I think
The Milwaukee, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, you go.
The Milwaukee Bucks, certainly a team that like is desperate and needs to make a swing, but doesn't have a ton of assets. It's basically like Ryan Rollins, AJ Green, and a 2031 first. Not getting it done. 2032 swap.
I mean, it might need to for Dallas. A couple of teams.
But again, maybe you're not doing it at that point. In Chicago, Davis is from Chicago.
Yeah. Sacramento.
Yeah,
I think
Kings, Bulls always are going to be in these.
I think Anthony Davis would help the Kings more than he would help any other team.
What are they doing with Sabonis then?
I think they're playing both of those guys. I think they're playing. Anthony Davis gets his dream. He gets to play the 4 in California. Monkey's paw curls.
Yeah. Now Chicago, if they got Anthony Davis in the East, they might be like, yeah, we're going to be a top 6 playoff team if we get him. Again, what the price end up being, right? Like, could trade away Kobe White and then Mavs re-sign him. He's a new partner for Cooper Flagg. Again, I just, the Warriors are the team that probably has, the most to offer. And Chicago could offer a lot, but hopefully they wouldn't. Right? Like, maybe it'd be at the draft, they offer this year's pick and next year's pick, something along those lines, so that you can offer 2 first, but also not be too encumbered going forward. That's a common one. The Raptors have all their picks going forward.
Mm-hmm.
They're another team that, that's if you got AD and you didn't have to, you could trade Pirtle and RJ Barrett or something. That's maybe you're kind of getting there. They're matching salaries. A lot of these teams too have apron issues as well, if you really get into it. Jerry Engelman suggested to the Hornets to give Dallas's draft pick back in 27. I don't think the Hornets will really have much interest in that. Here's one more for you, Danny.
Okay.
Probably more of an off-season thing. The Indiana Pacers. The math would be a little difficult. They would have to put McConnell, Toppin, Nemhard. If they did it during this year, Mathurin, that math on that would get difficult next year because he'd be a restricted free agent. They'd have Isaiah Jackson for next year, so it would be they would give up most of their depth, and I don't think AD is like the best fit for an up-tempo system at this point in his career.
It's definitely an inspired idea. It seems to run a
I
little bit.
mean, AD, Siakam, and Halliburton. That's interesting. I mean that type of pick and roll big with Halliburton. But again, depends on what the price is. All right. So what I'm coming to here is there's not an obvious candidate.
No,
If AD comes back and he starts playing at an all NBA level again, then the Mavericks should thank their lucky stars and try to move him even more aggressively, because I just don't think the value is there right now.
it isn't. And I mean, they're always with these sorts of things. There's always somebody with an established great player. There's somebody who comes out of the woodwork and overpays. I think Russell Westbrook has been a classic example of this over the years. But it it would be that type of deal. It would be, I already invoked Rob Hennigan. It would be somebody who's desperate to save their job. Anthony Davis is the best, the most talented player that they can get, that sort of a circumstance. So it might be somebody that's kind of off of this beaten path, but that's, if that's what the Mavericks new front office is relying on, well, that's a perilous game. And waiting, as we've said, is perilous too, because not only would he potentially help you win, but he could get hurt again and nuke it even worse. The injuries that he's dealing with and the weight gain are concerning, but they aren't catastrophic. But something else could be.
Well, there is at least some good news that's come out of Dallas. So with Cooper Flagg start, it's been disappointing offensively, although he did have an excellent game over the weekend at his best game with 25 points. The defense, despite the fact that he's been playing on the perimeter, some intriguing numbers early on this season.
For sure. And I was interested. I was actually looking this up for a different player that will come up at another point in this 1560. And Cooper Flagg, despite how many other large human beings the Mavericks have in their rotation, he's contesting 6.5 shots per game inside 6 feet. That is tied for the 13th highest in the league. But as I said, impressive considering the context. And the only other players in that vicinity in terms of contest with inside 6 feet per game that spend any time defending perimeter players are VJ Edgecombe, which is really fascinating, and Jaden McDaniels. And Cooper Flagg on those contests, so that's a high number, especially for what his defensive role has been. Opponents are only converting 52% of the shots he defends in that circumstance. And the only high volume contester that has a lower field goal percentage against is Luke Cornett, who's only played in 3 games. Flagg's number there is stronger than Wembanyama's, it's stronger than Ryan Kalkbrenner's, and it's stronger than Alex Sarr's. And so again, this is a small sample, but with Cooper Flagg, we don't have another NBA sample.
Well, and I do think also you look at these leaderboards even 6-7 games in, and it's the guys you would expect to be there most of the time. Like Isaiah Stewart is awesome at these numbers, right? Like, and they're on teams that are usually defending the rim pretty well. Less so maybe with guards. Like sometimes with guards, it can be an indication that your front court rim protection is not that great. But yeah, I think especially if it's down in the low 50s like this on this, even this early, I do think that there's obviously, yeah, I'm not going to tell you that he's exactly going to end at 52%, but it's even over this period of time, I think it's enough to say, yeah, he's pretty darn good at contesting at the rim.
And so
that also was the scouting report going back that was probably one of the first things that stood out to anybody is how good he was as a help defender.
Yes, exactly.
All right, let's talk about a game that took place over the weekend. Pelicans versus Spurs. De'Aaron Fox came back in that game. Spurs had a great win over the Rockets in the NBA Cup on Friday, and then on a back-to-back, that in fact was when Fox returned, not on Friday. And so he looked pretty good. We'll talk about that. Let's begin, though, more from the Pelicans' perspective. What are their fundamentals?
They're not exactly the most heartening right now, but the Pelicans are 2-8 on the season. They are 28th, third to last in clean the glass net rating, 27th in offense, 29th on defense, and they're projected to finish with 25 wins, which is second worst in the Western Conference. BPI gives them a 0% chance of making the playoffs. A piece of context on this game, the Pelicans are still without Jordan Poole, he's going to be out for at least another few days, might be more like another week. We don't know yet. And then Zion Williamson is still out as well.
Yes, yeah, it's a hip issue for Jordan Poole. So Trey Murphy had 41 points in this game and was 10 of 11 on twos, 5 of 11 on threes. Had a couple of huge putbacks as well. I didn't even think that he did anything that was so mind bending for a 41-point game. You know, I thought he was really mostly getting his stuff in the flow and, you know, just doing things that we've seen him do at a really high level, including finish. And so it's certainly impressive that he was 10 of 11 for 2. And I liked him getting on the glass as well. I thought he was solid in some of their help concepts as well. The way they chose to defend Victor Wembanyama, holding him to 8 and 19 shooting. Victor actually took 9 threes in this one. But he, like pretty much everyone at this point, they put the center on Harrison Barnes or Sohan in the limited minutes he played with Wembanyama, or Keldon Johnson, Carter Bryant played a little bit. So they're definitely hiding the center on somebody else, not Victor Wembanyama. And then they put Sadiq Bey on Victor, and they're basically switching everything off the ball. Spurs got them a couple of times by setting back screens with Jeremiah Fears' man. And that's where Fears, who has had a very impressive game overall, his biggest issue is struggling with communication, getting back cut or just switching. Then he would go to switch back, and then there's a guy wide open under the rim. He and Derek Queen both really kind of struggled with the amount of switching that they had to do, because they just were not going to like let a center get stuck on Wembanyama. And they didn't, Fears didn't want to get stuck on Wembanyama, so he didn't help enough a couple of times. But I would say my biggest takeaway is just that Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen continue to look pretty darn good as offensive rookies. And I'll start with Fears, and I said offense, but I actually want to start with his defense. He had really 5 or 6 just straight up stops in this game. He stopped in the third quarter. Stephon Castle went at him and he stripped him, knocked it out of bounds off of Stephon Castle. Another time where Castle was forced into a travel, trying to knock him out of the way. Castle, actually, those were his only 2 turnovers, which I felt like he had more than that. We'll talk about his game too, because he had 13 assists. But Fears then, De'Aaron Fox tried to go at him, and he did it. Fox did have a really nice game, and he hit the big shot on Fears with 30 seconds left, where he got him in the air and then did a nice little WNBA step through for a floater. But he also got a couple of stops on Fox, just one-on-one around the basket. So he held up pretty well, had a couple of steals. And he just is an absolute joy to watch. I really try to watch him every time I can, because he does stuff that's just really interesting out there. He's just such a natural. Like, there's one play where he's going for a loose ball, and he's not the type to necessarily dive on the floor. So, but he still is quick enough to get to the ball first. The defender dives on the floor trying to go for it. Fears just puts the ball out in front of the guy so he can't get it as he dives, jumps over him as he's dribbling, and then drives down the lane, kicks out to the corner, and they set up a 3. It was just the kind of plays you just don't see. Like, some of his dribble moves are ridiculous. I thought Castle did a pretty good job on him, as he does on most players. But Fears had a few times getting past him. And the most noteworthy thing was, even in a game in which Trey Murphy had 41, they started Kevon Looney at center. Like, there's nobody else who could do anything off the dribble. Like, when Fears was out, it was basically Fears and Queen are the only 2 guys, and they staggered Fears and Queen almost all game until they closed, because they didn't want to have them both on the floor defensively.
Yeah.
When either of those guys was out, they couldn't do anything. They could, like, the Spurs are switching. Victor's in a deep drop. They couldn't generate anything at all, except for these 2 rookies who both actually, I mean, they're going to have bad moments. They're probably both be inefficient throughout the year, but they're both like generating some pretty good shit.
It's encouraging, because the Pelicans made a bigger bet in some ways on Queen because the pick they gave up. But if those bets cash out with the players being good, well, that's the most important part of it, of what remains. And so for Fears, I mean, we'll talk about him a lot over the course of the year, especially if this Pelicans season, record wise, and all that stuff continues to stay where it is. But the rookie year for players is always about flashes. And with both Fears and with Derek Queen, even just 10 games in, we're getting enough flashes for me to be very encouraged and excited, even if there are some foibles, but every young player is going to have those.
Yeah, and Queen now, this is 3 games in the last week where he's looked pretty good and earned the close over Kevon Looney, who just was an absolute disaster trying to finish with Wembanyama in the game. And he wasn't he'll communicate, but he's got to be like, where the hell am I playing with Jordan Hawkins and like these. I mean, Herb Jones has the defensive mind that Kevon Looney does, but nobody else does. Like he just, you could tell he's doing stuff and expecting guys to be places, and they're just not, because their brain doesn't work as well as his does. But Kevon Looney did hit a 3-pointer. He was 1 of 2 from 3. We also saw Queen take 4 threes. That was really the Wembanyama effect, backing off of him. But the big thing about Queen again was the passing. 8 assists in 24 minutes, 5 of them coming right at the rim. And he did have 4 turnovers. He was a little bit aggressive on some of these backdoors, but he just is fantastic with these. And it might be at the point where you probably want to actually put pressure on him, as with the guy guarding him, because if you just let him see the floor, he's actually going to kind of dice you up. I mean, he had a couple of passes to Murphy. There's one he just threw, because what they'll do is they'll do the handoff game with someone like Murphy or Jose Alvarado, who at least they have guys who can come off of these and make shots. So you got to follow them over the handoff. And then, but once you've done that, then those guys can curl around and start to go back door. And Derek Queen is going to find it. I mean, he had one play, Wembanyama was kind of standing at the free throw line. They did that. Murphy just runs basically straight down the lane, and Queen just throws, like, Castle is there, and Queen just throws it over both of those guys and Wembanyama and just puts it right at the corner of the backboard for Trey Murphy to tip it in. And he just had a number of these really nice backdoor plays. He also was very aggressive going at Wembanyama with mixed results. He kind of tried to get in this hook shot, tried to knock him backwards a little bit. He got some okay windows, but also all the Pels were just so sped up. Queen overall was 5 of 14. And again, he's going to need to make that 3-pointer at some point in his career, I think, to really maximize himself. He's just not known as a shooter, because I do think there are guys who he's not going to be able to just bully. Like, he has a skill level, but he's going to have to rely on overpowering guys mostly. So, but his handle is really good. Like, the guys will go after his handle, and he'll just like go behind the back and lose them, and then he'll be in a get himself into a good position. So,
What
uh,
and on Derek
yeah.
Queen, one of the fascinating things is, like, you and I didn't watch film on him before; it just wasn't as high in the process. And one of my concerns in summer league was, will he be good enough at the things he needs to be good at to justify the flaws? And the answer is a lot closer to a yes than I expected 10 games in.
No, I agree. And again, because they have nobody else with Zion out, they're actually able to give him the ball and let him cook a little bit. Now, again, like, we could end the season and he's shooting 45% from the field, right? Like, that's definitely possible. The other thing that I thought was kind of interesting, and Carlo Makovich only played 9 minutes, but Baby Gortat was actually had a couple of huge Gortat screens on Victor Wembanyama. And this is just like, this is going to have to be the Wembanyama rules. And the Pels, when Wembanyama was on the floor, they actually did okay. They were 14 to 23 at the rim. That's a lot. And Wembanyama only played 32 minutes. So that's actually a pretty decent number relative to what we've been seeing with teams trying to go at the rim. And yeah, I mean, they missed some, but you're going to have to do that a little bit. And I think maybe it's gotten to the point where teams are being a little bit too judicious because they're afraid of getting blocked. But Makovich, I mean, what he was doing, he freed up Fears for a couple of nice plays. One was a layup. One was getting inside position on Victor, and then Fears was able to wrap around a beautiful pass to him for a layup. But yeah, he would set the screen and then get inside of Victor and basically just start boxing him out from the rim well before a shot has even gone up. And that was pretty effective. Like, the teams are just going to have to really focus on those type of tactics unless you have something along the lines of 5-out spacing where he's going to have to guard in the perimeter. We also saw a little bit of Micah Peavy just because we haven't talked about him before. This is some of his first real minutes when he was drafted in the second round. Kind of a trying to just think of like what the best way to describe him physically would be. He's a little undersized, I would say, but strong. Played a lot of years in college. Reasonably athletic. The shot is a question mark, but he stands out at least for how hard he's playing and how hard he's running. But wasn't able to really do much in this game because he was 0 of 4 from the field. Doesn't look like he's going to be a great shooter necessarily, but he did debut. He was mostly out there kind of running around and not killing him on defense, at least in this game. Let's see. From the Spurs standpoint,
Before we do that, let's get
Yeah.
to their stats. The Spurs,
Please.
after a comeback win over the Chicago Bulls on Monday, they're 8-2. They have the 8th best net rating, plus 6.2, 12th on offense, 6th on defense. BPI projects them to win 49 games and be the 5 seed, and gives them a 97% chance of making the playoffs.
yeah, that's pretty darn good. And that game against Chicago, which we're not going to talk about in great detail, that was a game in which Victor really started to have the matchup. He got to go against Nikola Vucevic a fair amount. The Bulls are allowing just a ridiculous amount of shots at the rim, and the Spurs are like, "Thank you very much. We would love for that to happen." And so Victor had, one of those just crazy dominant stat lines that we hadn't seen since that first Dallas game. They played Victor Wembanyama mostly in a very deep drop. He came out a little bit more trying to pressure Queen late in the game. And Victor has been, that helps him be very active on the defensive glass. He had 18 defensive rebounds. That's something that he was not great at early in his career. The Pels also just don't really have good offensive rebounders. But they were flashing in a little bit. They ended up with 14 for the game, but no one who's going to really like bother Victor Wembanyama that much. So he's pretty much in a deep drop. Pels took a ton of mid-rangers just off the pick and roll that they were totally fine to give up. They don't have great mid-range shooters on this team. Harrison Barnes continues to be pretty efficient. I thought he looked good. Just very judicious attacks. There were a couple of times like Queen was exhausted late and trying to guard Barnes and just gave up a 3. Another time they threw it to Barnes and he just went right through Queen for a pretty easy shot in the lane. So he just had some nice recognition. And then Fox was the big story in his debut. 24 points, 9 of 14, 7 of 9 from 2 against a team that has very limited rim protection. But I thought what looked the best to me, I don't know how much you saw this one, or at least what he did, was he just looked fast. He was getting to spots. He just looked very comfortable and calm and collected in a way that you don't see from some of the other guards on this team. Where Steph Castle, they did stagger Castle and Fox, but Castle played a little bit more at shooting guard with Fox than basically about equal. Half of his 35 minutes with and without Fox. And Fox only had 3 assists. Castle had 14, or I guess our box says 13. It said 14 initially. And Fox was more used as a scorer. Now, they tried to get Fox with Wembanyama at the start of the second and the start of the fourth. Those minutes went pretty well. Fox led a pretty crazy 23-2 run that you thought put the game away, but the Pels gamely fought back. And so Fox was just really good getting to his spots and looked very comfortable from mid-range. Most of his 7 of 9 from the field was from mid-range, and that's where he was really such an assassin in his best moments in Sacramento. It wasn't even so much like, he was getting out in transition and getting to the rim some. That was part of it. But where he was unstoppable in the half court was he was able to get to his spots, create separation, and then he was making those. And he looked really good there. He was, at times when he had a size advantage and the likes of, Jose Alvarado or Fears, he was able to rise up over them. And they were bringing him out of the right corner a lot and looking for him to hand off or get it on a handoff, moving to his left hand when he was playing with Castle in the starting lineup. But then he also was the point guard, obviously,
Well, so
without him. So
Nate, what's
yeah,
interesting about that is I watched more of their win over the Bulls than I did the Pelicans game, and the story was
yeah.
largely similar. And I thought that so De'Aaron Fox in the Bulls game, he was 7 of 8 from two, and was some a fair amount of the mid ranger. There are some defensive similarities between the Bulls and the Pelicans. I'm keen to see what it looks like for De'Aaron Fox when they play against more robust teams, including that'll be Wednesday. They play the Warriors. We'll see who on the Warriors plays in that game. But it'll be, I mean, for Fox, it was that, and also like you brought up in the disparity between who is generating the assists. It wasn't as extreme as the Pels win, but it was 11 for Castle and 5 for Fox. Fox did have 6 turnovers. He had a couple of rusty mistakes in the Bulls game, but overall, like the most important thing is, does he look good physically? And I thought he did.
Yeah, and for Castle, let's talk about him in a little bit more detail here momentarily. But 8 of Castle's 13 assists are at the rim, and he's really good at finding Wembanyama. Now, he's probably their best guy. He's just going to throw it up to Wembanyama the way you should. And hey, you know what? Like, yeah, it might get knocked away every once in a while, but also there's an 80% chance of this shot being a 100% shot. So it's worth the chance is worth taking on some of those plays. But yeah, you looked at Fox more closely. I think it was a great time to do it, with the possibility that his role is going to change now with the return of Fox. What have you seen from him in the early going?
It's been fascinating because Stephon Castle, his basketball reference usage, which we use, we use total usage to explain that, but basketball reference usage is basically the same. It was 26 last year. It's 25.8
Yeah, I
this
mean,
year.
we could just say usage for that.
Yeah, usage.
Yeah, and it's creation for the other one, which
That's right.
the those stats are in the oven
Mhm.
early in the season here.
And so Stephon Castle
get 'em
last
out soon.
year, on the same basic usage, 52% true shooting, that has jumped to 58. And that was really beyond the change in his role with De'Aaron Fox. I'm like, okay, what is leading to that? An important piece of context at the beginning is that his usage is the same, but how you're getting there, because remember, there are multiple pieces rather than just taking shots, is that Stephon Castle is getting that usage with a big bump, in part because De'Aaron Fox was out, in assists and turnovers. He's actually taking, if we're doing it on a per 36 basis, he's taking 2.5 fewer shots per 36, but making up for that by upping his assist rate by about 3 per 36 and the turnovers by 1.5 per 36, roughly. And so, but still, he's still making a lot more of the shots he is taking. And there are a couple of important parts of that story. And that's what I watched some film and also just going through the stats. So the first part of it is something that we see a lot for young players, which is a significant improvement in Stephon Castle's finishing around the basket. So last year, Castle converted 66% of his shots around the basket. That's up to 77%. And it's
I
not
mean,
that
and 66% was a very good number for a
yeah,
rookie guard to
absolutely.
begin with.
For rookie guard to begin with. And now that's up to 77. And it's not that he's dunking it so much more because his shot rate has gone down. He's getting so much more necessarily like easy gimme shots, because those are roughly the same proportion of his attempts. He's just making more. We don't have the contested finishing stuff all the way yet. But it looks good when I've been watching, and I've watched a fair amount of the Spurs already this year. So that's one component, and that's something that we see. And then another that we also see sometimes with young players, especially guards, is that he's getting to the line more. Some of that's having the ball in his hands more, but that's getting there. And so even though Castle isn't the greatest free throw shooter, he's in the low 70s, those are still high value relative to anything else. So those are it's exciting, because if his finishing is anywhere close to this real, that is an important part of what can be his effectiveness as a scorer moving forward. That's not the part
Yeah.
that really
Well,
intrigued
and
me.
quickly to
Of
build
course.
on that, I mean, the combination of he and Wembanyama is very solid. And I think the gravity of Wembanyama as a roll man, Wembanyama doing more rolling to the basket now, is really helping probably this finishing, because the center is just not going to come over if he does. And Castle deserves credit for this too, because he's been so aggressive finding Victor for these alley oops, that now because his passing is so good, it's opening up his shooting a little bit more. And obviously that's a big part of that is Wembanyama and his gravity. And then, he obviously is very athletic. I mean, he had this dunk in the Pelicans game on the fast break where it looked like he was just gonna like jump through the bottom of the
Mhm.
rim. Like he dunked it and he was like his head was still going up, like looking down in the rim. It was one of those pretty impressive ones. But he's really a 2 foot leaper, and that helps him, I think, to avoid some of the finishing problems that other guards can have, where they're just wildly out of control, hoping to draw a foul, flailing into the cameras, missing off the backboard, giving the other team a fast break. Like because he's a 2 foot player, he just has to play a little bit more under control, and then he also can kind of load up and draw some fouls. And of course, he's stronger than the average one of these guys. So I think there's a lot to that finishing that makes it pretty interesting, and we'll get to some of the more uh, overarching questions about Castle and how it's all going to fit in here. But what else did you have on him before we talk about that?
The other shift from last year is something that I wanted to do a little bit of film work on, which is that last year, Stephon Castle on 2-point jumpers
Hmm.
was converted 37%. And that over 10 games is 56% this year. And so I watched all of those shots, and it was a mixed bag. The positive, there are two big positives. One is that Stephon Castle shoots that 2-point jump shot like he's confident in it. Like this, at some points that matters, and that's so much different than the 3-pointers that Castle takes, where it's kind of like, ah, shit, I have to do this. And with the twos, it's this is a shot I think is going to go in. And comparing it to last year, more my memory of last year, I didn't go back and watch film last year. So that's Castle, his balance on those 2-point jumpers seems better. Even if it's a pull up, his feet are more consistently under him. And what I remember on the draft film from UConn, it's more repeatable, which is really important. The concern is I brought up that he shoots it like he's confident in it, but pull up twos, long twos are generally a bad shot. And so they're open. You're taking it. You first of all, either you're taking it because you have to, or it's because the other team is conceding it. And there were a lot of those. I thought there were because the Spurs have played the Rockets, where Amen Thompson was guarding Stephon Castle, and there was one where Amen Thompson is playing he's playing the finish and only like half-heartedly contests the pull up. Castle ended up missing that one, but that's the shot where it's like they're giving it to you. You don't have to take it, but you can take it. The other one, Amen Thompson contested it better, and it just seemed like it was more of a no-hoper. So I think that there are reasons to believe that Castle will be better on this shot than he was last year. But watching the film, I think that 56% overstates it.
Yeah, I mean that's like a Kevin Durant esque
Exactly.
number. Now, the way he's being defended, he can get to these shots and he can jump out of the gym. So I'm not. I don't think that necessarily like wouldn't be a weapon for him. The way he's being defended is fascinating because what I thought was, oh, it's obvious, right? Everyone else on this group can shoot. You put your center on Castle, and I think teams haven't done that as much. They've gone more with Barnes because they're so desperate after what we've seen to avoid getting their center on Wembanyama because Wembanyama just cooks centers. And so if you put your center on Castle, then Wembanyama sets the screen, and now your center is on Wembanyama, and teams don't want to be in that situation. They want to be able to switch everything with Wembanyama, and if you get your center on Wembanyama, then it becomes harder to switch him off of Wembanyama if it's somebody else. Now, I would still explore that pretty closely, because and in the Pels game they just weren't guarding him for three. Last time I looked, he was 11 of 44 from three. Some of these misses, even like the way his free throws go in, he's shooting 70% from the line. It just they don't inspire confidence. Like some of these misses are just way off. And when you look at his form, his right elbow still flies out. Like it doesn't look that much more comfortable than I think it did before. But the question is, so I still think he's been more aggressive shooting it. Obviously, it takes about 4 a game. But the question is, A, will that ever improve to being passable? I think less likely that it will be. And then if it's not, then what do you do with him? Well, you can put him in the dunker spot. He can dunk reasonably well, but you'd like to have Victor down there more. Or is he just so good with the ball and that putting the center on him doesn't work because he's also with Victor, and obviously his defense is really good too, so that makes him more playable. So can he get to the point where he's so good on the ball where he's not holding these guys back? Like, I don't think he's ever going to be as good as De'Aaron Fox, but maybe I'm wrong about that. And his passing has got. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing is that his passing has gotten so good.
It has,
to
and
where
I mean,
yeah, it's not like unbelievable. I think it's a lot of it is again somewhat relying on Victor, but it's way ahead of where I certainly thought it would be at this point. I didn't even think he was going to be playing point guard, which again, like that makes it a lot more viable for him to be a non-shooter than if he's playing shooting guard, which is kind of more what I thought he would be. Anything else on these guys?
No, I think we could say if I did some work on the kind of the non-Cornet, non-Wembanyama minutes, but let's build that sample out before I talk about that.
Yeah, and Cornet has returned. How did they use him against the Bulls?
They did. So for the most part, in the first three quarters, Mitch Johnson was using Cornet as the Wembanyama replacement, and to the idea of 48 minutes of rim protection, all that. But then in the fourth quarter, played them a lot together, and that went really well. They totally walled off the rim. I'll pull the stat just because it's going to change. In the minutes that the French Vanilla combo has played together, opponents are shooting 25% at the rim. It's a small sample. It's only 54 possessions, but it's hilarious that that is that low. And so they were walling off the rim. Wembanyama was getting his eating against Vooch, and part of that was presumably having Cornet on the floor. So, but the general conceit when Cornet has been available is mostly he's the replacement, and then some that. But the other reason why that matters, I'm not going to get in all the stats, is just having him out there. That means that you're getting 48 minutes of very good rim protection, elite rim protection, and that's huge.
Yeah, and they can play the same way too, right? They're going to play that deep drop. That's what they've been doing with Victor. That's what Cornet is most comfortable with. And I think the other thing that stood out to me from the Pels game is just the overall level of activity is pretty high from this group, whether it's Devin Vassell, who's not having an unbelievable year, and I still kind of wonder about whether he's a true starter level of player for a group like this. But I thought Jeremy Sohan actually had a really nice game playing center. Again, that's against the Pels. They're switching, but he was +2 when he was on the floor without Victor. So he played backup center. Now it'll be a little bit more difficult for him to find time. And I'm curious to see what direction they go there. The Sohan at center minutes have not been as good in other games. Lindy Waters the third is back as well to give him another shooting guard style player. Julian Champagny is rock solid. So they just, and even Keldon Johnson has brought a high energy low. So one of the big things about this team is they don't really have any pigeons defensively.
Yes.
And so that, and then you throw Victor or Cornet back there, or even French Vanilla, hopefully not Polish Vanilla as much. And then you've got, I think my biggest, as much as like some of the guys have popped offensively, I probably, especially given the respect I have for Victor's defense, I probably should have just picked these guys to be a lot better on defense. Like that's where I'm going to be wrong about them. It would seem in all likelihood. All right, we got time for a couple more things here. Let's talk about the Denver Nuggets.
For sure. And I think they're one of the bigger stories in the league, even if parts of it aren't surprising. And the Denver Nuggets are 8-2 on the season. They're second in basically everything. They're second in net rating, they're second in offense, they're second in defense. We'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, that second in defense, I'm very curious to hear what the fundamentals say on that.
I did some digging on that. And so BPI projects them to, continuing the second theme, to finish second in the West, 56 wins, and expects they're going to make the playoffs. And so just from a big picture standpoint, the Denver Nuggets are 8-2. They beat Sacramento on Tuesday night. Their two losses are overtime to the Warriors on their opening night. Opening night. That was the first night. And that wild NBA Cup loss in Portland. So they've had two losses by a combined 8 points, 2 in regulation because one of them went to overtime. And that's pretty remarkable. And when you could think about kind of where everything is, they haven't really lost much. And so I wanted to kind of take stock of, well, what is and what isn't real with that. And What is real, thankfully for them and thankfully for us as basketball fans, is Nikola Jokic. And Jokic is, we're still getting, I'm not leaning too heavily on the all-in-one stats, but he's number one in VORP by a bunch. He's number one in BPM as well. And reason for that, going into the win over the Sacramento Kings on Tuesday, Jokic has 73% true shooting on 25% usage, which would be his lowest usage rate since 17-18, but there are reasons to think that that could change. And so he has been devastatingly efficient as an individual player. And brace yourselves, the Nuggets have a 128.8 offensive rating when Nikola Jokic is on the floor. That is just astonishing. And that dropped before tonight, that dropped to a 105 when he sits.
And that's with them shooting 33.5% on threes when he's out there. It's not even that they've heated up from the outside yet.
Right. And Jokic, he's converting 90% of his shots inside 4 feet, and he's only taken 6 attempts, but he's 83% on his long twos, meaning shots twos that are
5 out of 6.
Yeah, 5 out of 6. Yeah. But that's just like, okay, it's like he's making.
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably have witnessed every single shot that he's missed inside of 4 feet personally this season.
Well, and I was thinking when I forgot to mention this when I was talking about their 2 losses, it reminds me a lot of that Jason Tatum quote where it's like, you remember the losses, because we've spent a lot more time with them talking about the losses, because we did both of those games for those podcasts than we did a lot of their wins.
Well, it's also because their wins haven't been the most exciting matchups in the world.
Well, let's get to that. I mean, because so that is a huge thing to flag, is that they have 8 wins. Only 2 of them are against high-level teams. And both of those high-level teams were without their best players. So they beat the Wolves without Anthony Edwards, and they beat the Warriors without Stephen Curry. And there's, like, you could argue that their second best win was against Miami, but Bam got hurt in that game. He only played 8 minutes. And so they've also played, after tonight, they played 6 out of their 10 games at home, was 6 out of 9 before tonight. And their only road win is against the Wolves without Anthony Edwards. So, like, the context there does matter, but they are absolutely steamrolling teams. The plus 13, including the glass net rating, is completely ridiculous. And so there are, but if you beat the crap out of the teams that are in front of you, that counts too.
Yeah, well, so obviously everything is awesome statistically, and Jokic also, like, the defense has been great when he's been out there, so he's looking really good in some of the defensive impact metrics so far. And then the other thing that's going great for them is Jamal Murray. He's scoring a lot more. It really has been back this year now to kind of a big 2, with him up to 27% usage. And yeah, you can make the point that he's kind of overall where he was last year, but he always starts terribly. So the fact that he's starting this well, and just watching him too, he's getting more separation than he was in the past couple of years, and particularly last year. So I've been really pleased with what I've seen from him, and that's probably the biggest development that they've had in the early going, because we know that Jokic is awesome. But there are maybe a few, I'm not going to say canaries in the coal mine, because these guys are probably a pretty decent bet to have the second best record in the West, regardless of whether there are any canaries in the coal mine or not. Maybe the canary is just like slightly coughing a little bit. But what are those, if we're going to focus in on them?
It's been a rocky start for Cam Johnson. 48% true shooting, and some of that is just going to improve. 24% on 5.1 threes per 36, but the attempt rate on threes is concerning for Cam Johnson. You think that he's going to step into the Michael Porter Jr. role, but he's not really taking quite as many shots yet. I think that Johnson's 2-point conversion, that will definitely improve too. Getting more familiar with Jokic, that is something that could take a little time, but he's going to get that. And then Aaron Gordon's still drilling his threes overall. So is Tim Hardaway Jr., but Christian Braun, I don't even know if this is a canary, but I mean, so far through the season, Christian Braun 17%. That's a problem, but only 3 3-pointers per 36 minutes. And we talked about it a lot when he got that extension, that he has to reach certain thresholds in order to make his positive sing. And I think he'll get there eventually, but it's the year-old line, like the 3 and D, it's always finicky, and it might not even be 3.
What about the defense? How did those numbers stack up? How real is that number 2 defense? Because that was the number that made my eyes really pop when we looked at their overall stats.
I don't think it's super real. I mean, so the Nuggets defensive success is really built around 2 of the 4 factors. Defensive rebounding, that's real. I mean, they have Jokic, they have even Valanciunas on the second unit now. And then the other one is they're doing extremely well, 4th overall in opponent effective field goal percentage. Well, they're 4th overall, but they're 13th in location effective field goal percentage. And the big reason for that difference is because teams just aren't hitting threes against them. Denver allowing a league low 31.5% on opponent 3-pointers, 33% from the corner. And it isn't a circumstance of like, oh, well, they're really like trying to take it away. The Nuggets give up the second most corner threes in the league. So there is a big regression that's happening. And it really is from the 3-point line, because you can say, okay, one of the other ways that a team's location effective field goal percentage is really different than their actual is they're great at rim protecting. The Denver Nuggets are not great at rim protecting. They're 22nd in the league right now. That has not been any strength in the Nikola Jokic years. And so really what this is
22nd in opponent field goal percentage at the rim.
Yeah, 22nd,
Yeah.
so meaning 8th highest. So it's
Yeah.
not a circumstance where that's one of the ways that you could like. So for example, a team like the Pistons, they can have a difference in this, but it's because they do a great job protecting the rim. The Nuggets don't do that. And so really what this is, their defense doesn't have to be great for them to be great, but it is great right now because teams are missing shots they should make.
Yeah, now the good thing for them is if their defense drops to 12th, they're still a mid 50s win team.
Right.
And right, I mean, the issue has been when they get down to like 20th, then they got problems. And yeah, I mean, the non-Jokic minutes are still hurting them, but the big reason that there's such a differential is that they're just completely killing teams when Jokic is on the floor. And so they're like -5 when he's off, like that you can deal with. -10, they actually have still been able to deal with that. But
yeah, but importantly,
but it's harder to deal with. You got to play Jokic more minutes, and it was good like today against Indiana. They're able to not play Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon didn't play. So and obviously they're Andrew Nembhard's back, but
they played
really
Sacramento
struggling.
on Tuesday.
What am I looking at?
There was a crazy Jazz Pelicans game.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at the wrong day. Sorry, I'm looking at Saturday. Apologies. Did they lose to Sacramento?
No, they beat him.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, there we go. Great radio here. Maybe that means it's time to pack it in after 10 hours of flying today. But we got lots of more interesting stuff coming tomorrow. We're going to do a gamer, catch up on those for a bit. Then Thursday, we'll finish out the 50 and 60, and then NBA Cup Gamer on Friday is the schedule. So lots of interesting stuff here. OKC's ridiculous defense we'll talk about on Thursday. I did a film breakdown of Reed Shepherd. So we got lots more cool stuff coming the rest of the week. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you all next time.